Developing today, the British monarchy is in transition, as King Charles's cancer battle is far worse than what the British mainstream media is reporting. If you have been following the news lately, you might think everything is proceeding normally behind the palace walls, but the reality is far more serious. Just recently, new pictures emerged showing the monarch at Fortnum and Mason overnight, and these images have caused more concerns about quite how bad his health is deteriorating. He looks visibly frail, thin, and exhausted. But if you look at the major newspapers or television broadcasts in the UK, you will barely find a mention of this. Why is that? What we are seeing behind the scenes in the royal court is a swift, quiet transfer of power taking place from Buckingham Palace toward Kensington Palace, the office of Prince William and Catherine. Yet, the public is being kept in the dark because of a tight lid on information. The broadcasters and newspapers that make up that infamous royal rota have signed up to effectively a vow of silence. They are under intense pressure from the royal family to keep the true state of the king's health quiet, choosing to prioritize palace access over honest reporting. But not everyone is keeping quiet. Independent journalists and editors are starting to speak out, refusing to bow to the demands of Buckingham Palace. One of the most prominent voices in this space is Tom Sykes, the European editor-at-large for the Daily Beast and the creator of the brilliant Royalist Substack. Sykes was actually thrust out of the International Royal Rota precisely because of his refusal to bow to the demands of Buckingham Palace and not report on what is really going on with King Charles's health. He chose to report the truth rather than parroting official propaganda. This raises a fundamental question about the role of the monarch. The health of the king is not just a private family matter. It has profound constitutional significance. The king is the head of state, and questions about his physical capacity to carry out official duties inevitably become matters of public interest. Yet the palace's public relations machine continues to manage and manipulate the narrative, telling the public to ignore the evidence of their own eyes. This leads us into an incredibly intense debate that is currently unfolding behind closed doors: the call for abdication versus the implementation of a formal regency. If you talk to the press pack who follow the king, his public appearances have become incredibly brief. He is in and he is out in a matter of minutes, looking exhausted and struggling to keep up with the physical demands of his role. Because of this, some royal experts, including Tom Sykes, are openly calling for King Charles to abdicate. Sykes argues that Charles needs to step down immediately for the sake of his own health. He has described the palace's decision to let him carry on with official duties as simply inhumane. It is not fair to Charles, and it is not fair to the country. The palace is involved in what can only be described as a titanic gaslighting exercise, pretending everything is fine while the monarch is clearly struggling. Any ordinary doctor treating a patient in this condition would call up their partner and say that this person needs absolute rest and recuperation. They need to focus entirely on their recovery and be kept completely away from any sources of stress to have the best chance of a long life. Instead, Charles is being kept on a grueling schedule to maintain the appearance of a functioning reign. To make matters worse, Charles's brief 3-year reign has already fallen into complete chaos and disarray. His handling of major crises has been disastrous, particularly when it comes to Prince Andrew and Prince Harry. For 3 years, Charles sat on the fence regarding the Prince Andrew debacle, unable to make a firm decision, which allowed the situation to unravel and damage the family's reputation. While some argue for abdication, others, like the host Dan, believe that a different path is necessary: the establishment of a formal regency where Prince William operates as a regent. A regency would allow Charles to remain king in name and keep the title he has waited his entire life for, while officially passing the executive responsibilities and decision-making powers to his eldest son. In fact, both of these dynamics are already happening simultaneously. Charles is desperate to hold on to the job he was born for and waited his whole life to have, while behind the scenes, major strategic decisions are increasingly being routed through William's office for his approval. We saw the stark contrast in their leadership styles with the Prince Andrew situation. While Charles sat on the fence for 3 years, the moment Prince William intervened, the entire matter was resolved, and Andrew was out in a month. This clearly shows that William is already making a lot of the big decisions. There is also a strong suspicion that the king's aides are actively keeping the truth of the situation from him, protecting him by only presenting positive news and front pages that tell him he is doing a marvelous job. In reality, Charles believes he is still the king, but William knows that he is the one who is actually running the institution now. This professional relationship between father and son has become incredibly strained, with very little face-to-face communication, leaving their respective offices and private secretaries to handle the transition in a cold and disconnected manner. To understand why this transition is so fraught, we have to look closely at the dysfunctional dynamic between King Charles and Prince William. In public, they project absolute unity, but behind the scenes, their professional and personal relationship is incredibly cold and complex. The king and his heir rarely speak face-to-face. Instead, almost all communication is funneled through their private secretaries, making interactions feel like negotiations between two corporate entities rather than conversations between father and son. There has always been an underlying difficulty and strain in their relationship, rooted in the painful history of their childhoods. Rather than bringing them closer, Charles's health decline has actually exacerbated these tensions, making their professional relationship more dysfunctional than ever. Yet, the mainstream media, desperate to maintain palace access, continues to print fairy tales about father-son bonding. A classic example of this occurred recently when newspapers ran headlines about William traveling to Balmoral for a brainstorming super conference with his father. The public was told they were huddling over long walks, planning the future of the monarchy. But independent journalist Tom Sykes quickly exposed this as absolute rubbish. In reality, William was staying in an entirely separate house, far away from Burke Hall. He wasn't there for a constitutional summit. He had brought his friends up to Balmoral to go grouse shooting. The palace machine fabricated this story of unity, expecting the public to swallow it hook, line, and sinker. This disconnect is also highly visible in how they handle family crises, particularly regarding Prince Harry. William's cautious apprehensions have repeatedly been proven correct. When Charles agreed to meet with Harry, it was under the strict premise that Harry would finally abandon his ongoing security lawsuits against the British government and the Home Office. This legal battle has put Charles in an incredibly difficult position. Charles chose to believe Harry would move on, but William warned him otherwise. Sure enough, the moment a new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, was appointed, all of Harry's promises went out the window, and he immediately resumed his heavy lobbying efforts. As a close friend of William's pointed out, the prince was right about Prince Andrew, and he was proven right about Prince Harry as well. This brings us to a massive shift expected to occur once Prince William eventually takes the throne. There is a growing and almost inevitable feeling within royal circles that when William becomes king, royal titles will be formally stripped from members who have stepped away from official duties, most notably Prince Harry. For a long time, the traditional argument from Buckingham Palace was that these titles are bestowed by God, and no mere man has the authority to strip them away. But that defense was blown out of the water when Prince Andrew's military and royal titles were abruptly stripped. That moment proved titles are merely the product of a monarchical executive order. It didn't require lengthy parliamentary debates. It was resolved in 5 minutes with a simple note published in the London Gazette. Now that the precedent has been set, the conversation has shifted. Under King William, the question won't be why we strip these titles, but rather, why should these individuals keep them? As we look to the future of the monarchy, we are also getting a clearer picture of what the next reign will look like, particularly through the lens of Princess Catherine. Her recent public messages and speeches have shown an incredible level of confidence. Commentators like Tom Sykes have noted that we are getting a tantalizing glimpse of Queen Catherine, a woman who knows exactly what historic moment she is stepping into. Her message to the nation has been powerful, focused on stepping away from the endless rat race of modern life. She has urged people to appreciate the simple things: family, children, love, and spending time in nature. While some might dismiss this as a simple message coming from someone with vast estates in Norfolk, the true power lies in the medium, not just the message. It is the way she presents herself, confident, grounded, and deeply focused on what truly matters: raising healthy children and fostering a loving family. The genuine and dignified privacy of the Wales family stands in absolute stark contrast to the performative media strategy of Meghan Markle. The differences between these two women could not be any more profound. Just this past week, Meghan faced intense backlash for what critics have described as a highly hypocritical Thanksgiving promotion. She sent out a commercial email campaign using the names of her children, Archie and Lily, to promote and sell a $32 jar of honey. This move shocked even seasoned royal observers. When Harry and Meghan left the royal family, their primary justification was a desperate need for their children's privacy. They famously obscure their children's faces on social media, but this has become a convenient and performative way to have your cake and eat it too. By keeping their faces partially hidden, they generate public curiosity, while using their names in promotional emails to expand their commercial brand. On one hand, they claim their children are not for public consumption, and on the other, they serve their names up in marketing emails to sell honey. Contrast that with William and Kate, who drive their children to school every single day, let them play matches, and afford them a normal, quiet life completely out of the media spotlight. The transition we are witnessing is not just about individuals. It's about the very way we receive information. We are living in fascinating times, and this is why independent coverage of the British royal family has become so essential. The narrative surrounding the House of Windsor is no longer being exclusively set by the traditional British newspapers or the palace's public relations department. For decades, the mainstream media and the royal rota held a tight monopoly on what the public was allowed to know. They decided which stories to run, which scandals to minimize, and how to frame the lives of the royals. But that era of total control is rapidly coming to an end. The rise of independent media platforms like Substack and YouTube is fundamentally changing the landscape of royal reporting. Platforms like the Royalist Substack by Tom Sykes and our own work here on Outspoken are proving that the public is hungry for honest, unfiltered analysis. We don't have to rely on the sanitized, palace-approved press releases that the mainstream media serves up daily. When independent outlets break major scoops, they are often rubbished by the official rota, only for those same stories to be proven correct shortly after. This shift has democratized royal journalism, allowing writers to operate outside the constraints of palace access. However, this new era of independent media also brings a massive amount of responsibility. As the influence of independent platforms grows, it is incredibly important that those of us with proper journalistic backgrounds remember our roots. The internet is filled with people setting up cameras and broadcasting complete nonsense, chasing clicks with wild, unsubstantiated rumors and sensationalist clickbait. That is not real journalism. For independent media to truly challenge the mainstream and hold powerful institutions like the monarchy accountable, we must hold ourselves to much higher standards than the mainstream media often does. Our reporting must stand up to intense scrutiny, and we must welcome the public to challenge our findings and poke holes in our arguments. True journalism is about verifying facts, cultivating reliable sources, and presenting the truth, even when it is uncomfortable or goes against the official narrative. As we look at the intense speculation surrounding King Charles's health and the future of the monarchy, it is absolutely vital to separate confirmed facts from media interpretation and speculation. This is not just a celebrity gossip story. It is a matter of profound constitutional significance. The king is the head of state, and questions about his physical capacity to carry out official duties inevitably become matters of public interest. Throughout British history, periods of royal illness have always raised serious questions about continuity, the delegation of responsibilities, and the role of the heir. In this situation, the palace faces an incredibly difficult balancing act. On one hand, supporters of the monarchy argue that the king's medical privacy must be respected, and that he deserves the dignity to recover out of the public eye. On the other hand, critics argue that the public has a right to clear, transparent information about the health of their head of state. Too much secrecy from the palace inevitably invites wild rumors and speculation, while too much disclosure risks turning a serious medical battle into a continuous public spectacle. So, what do we actually know with absolute certainty? We know that King Charles is receiving treatment for cancer, and we know that he has continued to carry out public duties on a limited and highly managed scale. We also know that Prince William's role within the monarchy has significantly expanded, with major strategic decisions increasingly requiring his direct approval. What we do not know with certainty is exactly how bad the king's health has become, whether a formal regency is actively under consideration, or whether abdication has been formally discussed within the royal household. Those remain matters of speculation, deduction, and media analysis. The most important story unfolding right now may not be whether an immediate abdication is likely, but rather that the monarchy is quietly, gradually adapting to a new reality. It is a reality in which Prince William is becoming increasingly central to the institution's day-to-day survival and its long-term future. While King Charles remains determined to continue serving, William is clearly preparing himself for the immense responsibilities that lie ahead. The real question is how this delicate balance of power will continue to evolve over the months and years to come. If you enjoyed this in-depth analysis and want to stay updated on the real stories shaping the future of the royal family, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more royal news, commentary, and independent media analysis.